All right, folks, it's definitely time for an update. So it's clearly an addiction. Somebody said it in the first post I've ever made, and it's absolutely true. So I actually added two more. I can't remember when it was the last update. I believe I only had those two. I added those two as well. I didn't do them at the same time. They're actually at different times. So this one here in the middle are 6 panels. They're 350 watt each. So it's roughly about 2K, slightly above. And then I figured, you know, I know the inverter supports up to 2000 watts. And I started digging into it, and I figured it's not a matter of how many watts it supports. It's a matter of actually amperage, and it can support all the way up to 80 amp. So if you are further from the house, like I am now with the fourth one, I will have to raise the voltage anyway. Therefore the amperage will go down, and maybe the inverter will take it. So I did a little bit of research, talked to mppsolar, and ended up buying 385 watt panels. I know in the video it looks like there are many here. There's only 6. It looks like it's broken into like 9 and 9, but no, it's actually only 6 panels. But they are 385, so it's 2.2 something kilowatt, and it just works perfectly fine. In fact, it's the most producing panel that I have naturally, but also because its location as well. To follow up with that, I had to add another inverter, two more inverters, and those are those two guys. Those are the same mppsolar LV2424 you know, hybrid. I'm not using it in hybrid modes. I mentioned in my previous videos that I was only approved for using it as an off-grid, and this is what it is. It's an off-grid system. Those two are connected to those two as well. So essentially, the two on the left are first phase. You can see it says, let's see, kind of hard to see, but P1 and P1, and then if I'll go to the other two, you'll see P2 and P2. So P2, there you go. So essentially what happens is that you see those cables that are not neatly arranged here. Nevertheless, they're going all the way to this box here, providing 4.8 kilowatt ability of one phase, and then those two in the bottom are providing 4.8 kilowatt of another phase. So almost 10 kilowatt in a US split phase 240 volt. And then it goes with the 6.2 cable all the way to my juice box, and the juice box is connected with a 1450 plug, so capable of 50 amp. Essentially the juice box is a 40 amp only, and my car will only take 32 amp. So it all works out. It's less than what those inverters can do, and I am happily charging my car at 7.6, 7.7 almost kilowatt, which is a 32 amp 240 volts for hours. When I say hours, if the sun is out, today it's actually going to happen. There are about 3-4 hours that the arrays combined are pumping around 8 kilowatt, 8.5, and this inverter, instead of sending the electricity to the batteries, which we'll talk in a second, it is sending it directly to AC, and therefore conversion is slightly better than putting in the batteries and then pulling out of the batteries and then putting it into AC. So it all works out. The batteries themselves are nothing changed here. There is a change coming. I'll post it in my next video. Just a reminder, those are the Chevy Bolt batteries. I broke them down to 24 volt batteries. So essentially I had to cut the battery and reassemble it. You can look at my channel how I did that. And because those are 24 volts 6S, so essentially nominal 22.8 volt. Those inverters are not big fan of that. Yeah, it doesn't work very well. It does work, but you're losing like 20% of the capacity of the batteries because their voltage is too low. So I added this guy, which is 300 batteries, normal 18650s, 2.6 amp hour each one. They're in 1S, so this entire block of 300 batteries is just a giant 1S, which is connected in series to the batteries, and this works fantastic, raising my voltage to 29.2. And those inverters are happy, and it just works fantastic. As for the batteries voltages, the cells are without, those two are without BMSs, those two with BMSs, they behave the same. I have no difference in voltage. I measure it almost daily. The BMS, doesn't really help here. You need a BMS to monitor it, of course, but it just works fantastic without it. The other thing I wanted to mention, I switched to a bus bar configuration. In the past, if you look at my videos, I would connect each one of the batteries in parallel to the next battery. I changed that. It's kind of hard to see, but there is a bus bar. It's a special aluminum metal. This metal is, I forget, 6101, which is great for conducting electricity. A little bit expensive, but worth the money. And then all the batteries are connected to the bus bar. So this will be the plus. The other side will be the minus. And this battery, which the 1S is taking the minus from one side and generating its own plus on a different bus bar here. So between, the minus, between this minus and this side, I'm getting the 29.2 volts at max, and it all works very, very nice. I've been running like this for a couple of months, and I couldn't be happier by adding 1S, making it a 7S configuration. There is more to this project coming in the future. You can see here the rails, so you can imagine what's going to happen. I'll post a new video when it's happening. And the other thing I wanted to mention, which is interesting, something I learned along the process, you would think that because you have two heavy bus bars, those batteries will upload and download electricity to the bus bar kind of equally. It actually doesn't happen like that, which kind of surprised me. So what you will see here that I only need a 6 gauge, the black that goes to the bus bar, 6 gauge, because there's about 20, 30, sometimes 60 amp, and this cable is so short, it's like 8-inch, that it can carry that load. It doesn't even get hot at all, so it kind of saves you on cable when you have a bus bar. But the interesting thing here is that this battery here at the end, for whatever reason, in both sides carries double the amperage. So I put 2 cables because I started noticing it gets hot, and it's carrying like 120 amp, and I couldn't really understand it. I tried to investigate this a little bit. I thought maybe it's the battery, maybe if I'll switch the batteries. None of this matters. It's how the electricity flows. I'm not in a full understanding of that, but I got to the conclusion for now that this is just the flow of the electricity, and in this side and that side somehow there is a higher load that is generated, and it's just fine. I'm okay with it. In the past there was, between this battery to that battery, there was 300 amp, because all the batteries were uploading in parallel the electricity, and then this was the end point, so it was 300 amp, and I did not like that. That's why I did the bus bar. So now it's 120, and I'm much happier. So this is it for the batteries. Maybe a little bit later today, when it's going to get hot, I'm going to show, the sun is going to get out. I'm going to show you how all those are pushing electricity, charging my car at maximum. The batteries themselves are more than capable of pushing 7.7 or 8 kilowatt. Those batteries are full Chevy Bolt installation. So if you take apart a Chevy Bolt car, you will find exactly the same setup, except the 1S that I mentioned, and therefore they're capable of actually pushing more amperage than what I'm doing. So roughly I'm pushing 300 amp from those batteries when there's no sun, and I'm charging it the full capacity of the juice box, which is 32 amp, 240 volts, and they don't get hot, and everything, chugging along, and everything is happy. The other thing that I wanted to mention, I did add connectivity to the house AC. This is this guy. So there are 4 breakers. Each one of the breaker is 20 amp, 110 volt. Of course, there's 2 phases here. So phase 1, skip 1, phase 1, and then phase 2, skip 1, phase 2. So sorry, phase 1, phase 2, phase 1, phase 2. And that's how the inverters are connected. Those 2 are connected to phase 2, those 2 are for phase 1. Not to confuse with this, which is the output of the mppsolars. This is the input. Why do I need an input? If I will ever need to charge my car and there's no sun for days. I do live in Massachusetts, and it gets crappy at times, and snow, and I'll end up using the juice box and just using the electricity of the house. That did not happen so far for the last year and I want to say 2 months or so, but better be prepared in case I need to use my car and there's no sun. The other thing I wanted to mention, juice box is fantastic because it does give you ability to control how much amperage it's going to pull out by a simple configuration, by a simple app configuration. And there's also APIs which I haven't got to the point to integrate. But what happens right now is if there is not enough power coming from the sun and not enough power in the batteries, this will draw by the app definition only 6 amp, and then you can configure it to 12 amp, 16 amp, 24 amp, or 32 amp. And in the future, what I will do, I will take the output from the mppsolar in terms of statistics and metrics, and using that I'll make automatic determination what amperage should the juice box push, and basically it kind of aligned itself to what is available instead of draining the batteries for no good reason if there isn't enough sun, or not draining the batteries, or not using the solar directly if there's too much sun. So that will happen in the future. Last thing I did, maybe I'll mention it, I just put this little nifty thing that when I park my car, this thing is hanging here, and then this spring here is kind of easy because it will just pull itself up, and then you plug it, and it's kind of fun because you don't have to run with cables that are on the ground and are heavy. So that works pretty well as well. I think that would be my update for now. Oh, maybe, sorry, one more thing. I kind of found those, I forgot the name, Allen something, DC breaker. Those are 600 volt, 100. This one is 100 amp. This is 60 amp. I love those breakers. They're just fantastic. And they give you 3 phases because it's both for AC and DC. So I'm using the 3 phases basically for the plus and the minus. Coming from the solar panel. So I actually prefer this a lot more than those little ones which tends to heat, and I don't like them too much. Another topic that I forgot to mention, sorry. The last panel or array that I showed you with 385 watt solar panels, I wanted to keep it in not 2S but 3S format. So this mppsolar supports up to 145 volt input, and because of the distance, which is about 70 feet away, it would be better to raise the voltage and lose less on the line. And I did try to do that, but a couple of days in the last couple of weeks, because there was no sun, I mean there was clouds, and then all of a sudden there was bright sun, it jumped to like 160 volts, and the mppsolar did not like it at all, and it actually shut down. There's a configuration, it will start itself after a couple of seconds and try again, and it did that up and down, and for the morning basically I didn't have any solar power because the voltage was too high. So I ended up putting it in 2S, unfortunately, which is not great because of the distance, and therefore this does get, even those 4-gauge cables do get hot a little bit. Not sure what to do with it yet. I think that the panels will get a little bit older in the future, maybe in a year from now, and then I'll be able to put it back on a 3S configuration and be below the 145 volts. The other thing to keep in mind, although mppsolar supports 145 volt input, the MPP range is all the way up to 115. So if you have 120 volts and they're clouds, it will not do as good job as if it would be below 115. I haven't found a huge difference, to be quite honest. There were a couple of weeks that this inverter worked with 3S panel configuration and ended up pushing close to 130 volts, 135 volts, and it was cranking like crazy. I loved it. So I didn't find, actually I'm not 100% sure, but I don't think there's a huge difference. You know, if the MPP is enabled or not enabled, when it's actually peaking performance. When it's not peaking performance, a different story. And then last, I keep saying last, the distance between the MPP solars is much further than the cable that they provide. The serial cable to connect between them, it does need to keep in sync on the phase, and it does need to keep in sync on the amperage that it's generating, so it will be equal. So each one, those two on phase 2, for example, will upload the same amount of electricity and not, you know, in an imbalance in either one of those. So I found online those cables that are 25 pins, not VGA. This is not VGA. VGA looks the same, feels the same, can plug into this, but it does not work because I think they're crossing the cables. But I did find online, you know, for very cheap, like $9 or whatever, a longer cable, and I was able to resolve the issue. I contacted mppsolar. They didn't really want to help me. They were adamant that, you know, the distance is important and you shouldn't have, you know, although from my perspective, just 1 foot different than their cable, they didn't like it. In the end, it works perfectly fine. I use those cables I found online, and I think I'm going to end this update. This is it. Thank you very much, guys.